we see 10% of people are creating fake email addresses or getting things delivered to different addresses, or just having their friends sign up and it's really them. How do you think about that trade-off?
I absolutely love that you asked this question because this has been something that has come up in my career as a source of debate on fraud and trying to eliminate fraud. I can't remember the source where I first heard this, but somebody much smarter than me said the optimal level of fraud in a business is not zero, right? Because there are trade-offs. It's all about trade-offs. The more you can guarantee the reduction of fraud, the more friction you are creating for well-intended customers.
My name is Jacob Rushfinn, CEO and founder of Botsi. And today on the Price Power Podcast, we're talking with Anthony Scarpaci. Anthony was a global VP of growth at Acorns, senior director at NerdWallet. He's also worked in growth roles at Betterment and Blue Apron. He is now a growth consultant advisor for consumer subscription brands through his own consultancy, Tunamatic. And today, we're talking referral programs. Everybody knows what they are and how they work, but in reality, most are kind of mediocre. Anthony shared an amazing framework he calls RIGHTT. The acronym stands for Relevance, Incentive, Guardrails, Human, Timing, and Tracking. And we can use it to design a great referral program. Let's dive in. So, referral programs can be pretty powerful for viral growth loops. Thinking back to the early PayPal and Dropbox days, I'd love to start with breaking down the different elements of a referral program.
Yeah, let's do it. So when I think about referral programs, there are quite a few key elements of what makes them successful. When you mentioned Dropbox and PayPal, the first thing I would share there is them being some of the earliest brands to do this space. The world of this incentive-based structure was generally pretty new, so it drove a lot of interest and enthusiasm from the base. And so the testing of these two-sided offers of either free storage or additional incentives worked really well for them to start to drive scale. And in the case of Dropbox, there's also something really endemically sort of natural within the product experience that makes sense for that growth loop from an organic perspective as well. For brands that are not necessarily ones that have a sharing component naturally baked into their product, and they're starting to think about referral programs beyond natural word of mouth after they have really strong product market fit and have hit a good level of scale. I like to think about it in what I like to call the RIGHTT Framework, which is just something based on what I've seen and then what I've led at Acorns. And so we could break that down of the different components because I think it would be helpful to think about
Let's
all
do
the
it.
various facets of it. The first one being R is relevance. So one area that a lot of brands struggle is they think, well, they just need to do cash incentives. But if cash is not aligned to the product delivery or what the customer's relationship to the brand is, it can be jarring. It could not be motivating. So you need something that is both relevant for the referring individual as well as the customer on the other side. The next one is, okay, how do you think about that incentive structure? And beyond the relevancy, you need to think about something that is going to get somebody out of bed, if you will, to start to refer. Because one of the biggest challenges that I see in a lot of referral programs is businesses have this small evergreen program that sits in the background. It's a small incentive. It's not necessarily the most compelling. It's not well promoted. And so it doesn't get a lot of participation. So really thinking about what are going to be the incentives that you use to get people excited and motivated, but also are going to further entrench both your existing customer and your referring customer deeply into the product. So I've done a lot of testing at brands like Acorns where we were testing certain types of incentives and then identifying, well, those things may not match as well to the long-term customer behavior that we want. So we continue to experiment with ultimately what are the incentives that are going to lead to a satisfied customer on both sides who's in love with the product and further becomes, an authentic advocate for the brand going forward. So that's I. G is guardrails. So while that's great, while you have a lot of these compelling incentives, you need to make sure that you're putting the right mechanisms in place to prevent fraud, gaming, all of those factors. A good example of where this went wrong, earlier in my career, I was at Blue Apron when it was pre-IPO, seemed like a rocket ship at the time. And within that meal delivery kit space, everybody was effectively doing referral programs where there would be a free box that you could send to a friend or family member, no strings attached, no questions asked. So one, there would naturally be some gaming from individuals just by changing locations or individuals who live at the same address. But then also for the friend side, there was no mechanism to require them to build that habit or give them a chance to build that habit paired with the incentive. And what you see now is in the remaining leaders in that space, like HelloFresh, any sort of referral programs require that there is, a series of deliveries for the customer to really try the product and make sure, and really give it a chance to see if it's, a fit for their lifestyle and for them to fall in love with it, which leads to more sustainable, profitable customer acquisition through that channel. So I think that's one area that some brands also get it wrong, not thinking about guardrails and the right requirements of the program when getting it started. The next one, H. So this one is really key. And this one, I think, broadly from a marketing perspective, there's always areas that are missed. This is about being human centric. And by being human centric, I think there's a few layers there. There is transparency and authenticity, but there's also the consistency of the customer journey and how you present the program to those customers within your app experience, through email, even through paid or organic social amplification. When I look at some referral programs of existing clients that I have now, or just other brands, sometimes I see, well, maybe they have the right incentives in place, but they're not getting them in front of the customer in a really prominent way or at the right time. So that's a key area to think about. Well, okay, let's take the journey one step at a time for the referring customer. How do they learn about the program? As we talked about before, make sure those incentives are compelling enough for them to be interested in activating and participating. How do you reduce all of the frictions to make it as easy as possible for them to share the referral opportunity with their friends in their network? And then how do you make sure every single touch point along the way continues to reinforce what are both sides getting out of it, reminding them they're in the right place, providing the education on the product to that new customer along the way, and making sure that as they go through the sign-up process, they know I'm in the right place. I still have this incentive following me so that I'm going to get rewarded. I know my friend will get rewarded, and close that full loop to make sure that it feels consistent and congruent from an experience perspective versus piecemealing all these components that don't feel natural or make sense to a customer. And that's one area that people sort of fall off as well. And then the last one of T is really sort of two pieces. It's timing and tracking. So timing, we talked a little bit up front about how, like, when is the right time for you to have a referral program? And part of it is you have to be post product market fit. You have to have customers who love you. You have to already have hit some of those milestones. And then you also have to have a meaningful scale of your customer base to make the program do anything sort of really meaningful for you, because you have to be careful about cannibalization of organic word of mouth. So the moment that you start to incentivize in any meaningful way sharing, you're naturally going to have some level of cannibalization of those who have come in before, who would refer otherwise. So you really want to make sure that you cut that piece down. You really want to make sure that you consider that before you start to incentivize things, because it will change your blended customer acquisition costs and economics for the business. And then lastly, on tracking, this is underlying fundamentals, you need to make sure you have a system so that you can track successfully all the referrals that are happening from your existing customers, so that you maintain a really positive experience for both of them. And ideally, you get to a place that you can create some transparency and visibility for them to know the status of their referrals and when they're getting paid for successful referrals, all of those pieces. So there's a lot there, but yeah, to reinforce sort of the framework is this RIGHTT framework, right? Relevancy, incentives, guardrails, human centricity, and then timing and tracking. And I think by making sure you consider and walk through all of those steps, a brand can understand, is referral the right thing for us right now? Do we have the capacity to start to test into this, and where might be the biggest gaps so we can refine the program over time?
Yeah, that's unreal. I love that framework. That's so helpful, and yeah, I have so many questions coming out of that.
Yeah.
So yeah, relevance, incentives, guardrails, being human, and then timing and tracking.
Yep.
So right with two T's on the end.
Yep.
It makes a lot of sense. Okay, so for relevance, maybe you can give examples of something, a referral program of the good and the bad side, maybe of a program that you've seen that is quite relevant, or does a good job there, and then maybe examples that are not quite as good, or you don't have to call out specific brands if you don't want to on the bad side, but I think it'd be interesting to compare and contrast that side. When I think about the other ones, yeah, we'll go into those. I have more questions there too.
Yeah.
Let's start there.
Yeah, let's do it. So another example of a brand that I think right now is doing a good job with thinking about the relevance factor is a company that I work with called GoHunt, and they are a hunting subscription app, subscription business for research, mapping, and also has an e-commerce arm. And one of the key components of their referral program is they give points that can be used at their e-commerce store for purchasing sort of hunting equipment and camping equipment when these individuals go hunting. So the incentive is directly tied to, the ecosystem, the industry, and the goals of their end customer. It's helping them have an even better hunting experience enabled by this brand. And that happens on both sides. So that's one where it's really dialed in to further enhancing the customer experience. One that I think, was not as strong when I was there, and I've since seen that they have evolved and changed it, is Dish Network. When I was there as a performance marketer very early in my career, there was a very significant investment in the referral program, which was heavily direct mail focused, because as you'd expect, it was there's not a lot of sort of in-app activations outside of the connectivity with the TV screen at the time. It was all gift cards. It was all just pure cash that was used to try to drive activation. But while it worked, it didn't, again, pay back to sort of any of the endemic value or value proposition for the brand. And now you'll see that they've since evolved that program to be also point-based around things like getting access to sort of movies they would otherwise have to pay for on demand, and other things that further get them to have a great viewing experience for TV. So I think that's sort of one of the key things, is you really want to make sure it ties to, why should I care? And also, if you take it away from cash for brands where cash doesn't make sense, and to be clear, cash or investments makes a lot of sense in fintech. You can't really avoid that. But in cases outside of the financial services industry, if you can take it away from cash, you can adjust the consumer's mindset to thinking about this as what's the next best alternative of participating in this program to get some money. Like, there's other side hustles, there's other mechanisms that people can use to get cash. But if you reframe it into something that's more relevant for the experience, you can dislodge people from doing that sort of comparison in their head and hopefully drive better participation rates.
That makes sense. So it seems that a lot of times the relevance and incentive are intimately connected, where if you can have an incentive that feels relevant, connected with actual product value, it has a higher likelihood of success. Of course, in fintech, the money is the product. cash incentives make
Yeah.
sense because it's all about financial products that makes sense there as well. Yeah, on the incentive side, do you think it's gotten harder to have real, truly motivational incentives? I think going back to the PayPal and Dropbox days, you're saying that type of incentive was just exciting because it was new. People hadn't seen that before.
Mhm.
Oh, I want free money. This sounds great. I'll just do it. Where now consumers are bombarded with these referral offers of give X, get X. And I find personally, I usually just ignore them, right? They're everywhere. Every app, every brand seems to need them, want them. So I guess, yeah, two parts. Are incentives harder to really make motivational and persuasive now? And then how do you make an incentive that is motivational?
Yeah. 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 Great question. So the first thing that I would say there is it is harder. And because of that higher hurdle, you need to think about how do you structure these incentives that make it both compelling, but also hit your unit economic requirements as a business. Um, so, in the case of Acorns, you will see that the brand does have some really large incentives for those who participate in really big ways. And there's also an urgency component to it. There's a time bound component to when some of those offers exist. So urgency is, direct marketing, growth marketing 101, right? So anytime you can make sure that there is an urgency component that increases the propensity to action. The other key thing I would say is, uh, you know, as you mentioned, like getting, do I want to participate? I'm just bombarded. I don't like. There's so many things going on in my life. I don't know. One of the contributing factors to that is a lack of a guarantee. So there has been countless testing, and experiences I've seen, either things I've directly managed or team members have managed of testing sweepstakes, for example, or a chance to get something versus a guarantee of something if I take X, Y, or Z action. And I often have found, in my experience, that whenever people are doing this opportunity to win something really big, even though it's a compelling, number or value or prize, people don't feel confident that they're actually going to get it. So they also don't participate. So when you can remove the sense of luck from it and make it really, really clear that, if you take X, Y, and Z action, you will get this reward. That's another key component to driving action.
Yeah.
Those are some of the initial things that come to mind there.
I would imagine also that in the sweepstakes concept, people might sign up because they want to win the reward, but they might not actually use the product long term. And so
Mhm.
you might give out this big reward. It may be uh, lower total cash value than if you had this guarantee for each user, but in the end, it doesn't result in as much because it's kind of the lottery effect, right? Once the lottery gets to mega billions, whatever, gets to a certain value, everybody and their mother signs up to do it because it's
Yep.
exciting and it's this. I think. Did you ever read the book Thinking Fast and Slow, Daniel Kahneman,
Mhm.
where I think in
Yep.
there it's something about there's I think he has some equation, but when it reaches a certain value, the expected gains in our minds, emotionally motivate us. That doesn't really matter if the chance is so low; it still seems like it's worth doing.
Mhm.
Where there's that effect where people get excited and they'll sign up and they'll do it, but in the end, is it really going back to the tracking? Is it really going to be valuable for your product in the end?
Yeah, I think that's such a great point. And there's a few sort of mental models that makes me think about, or frameworks. One is, in what you described, it's a combination of, well, how attractive is the prize or the incentive, and what is the level of friction to participate? I could win $1 million, and all I need to do is give you my email address. For a lot of people, sure, why not? That could take 5 seconds for me to add my email address. Um, but then on the other side of it, you have, okay, well, what do you do with this group of leads that you have? Because their inherent propensity to convert, their likelihood and intent levels are so low. The ultimate equation, and this it goes to a broader conversation about just ROI of customer acquisition channels. You think about your spend, your cost to get people to a certain milestone, and then net down funnel conversion rate. If $1 million gets 1 million customers, but only, or 1 million leads, but only one of them converts, whatever that 0.1% value is, that's not going to be efficient for you. And I have been in cases at previous brands where we've done incentive programs with sweepstakes where these influencers have promoted a sweepstakes. Customers have flocked to it to hit levels of lead volume that the business had never seen in a day before. The CEO was so excited about it, and thought, oh my gosh, this is going to change everything. But as we gave it time, that cohort of leads converted so low that economics were not terrible, but they were not as exciting as what we were expecting. So I think the quality piece and the intent of the customer is really, really key. So taking it back to some core referral programs, you'll see, some of the brands who are doing really well at this, make sure that the incentive is something that continues to reinforce that habit and behavior. We mentioned the hunting experience, and with a company like Acorns, you'll see that they use recurring investments, because they want to build the habit of the customer to continue to find, achieve the goals that align with the mission of the business. And so all those things reinforced are going to be best to make sure that when you're referring customers to the business, you're making sure you're getting people who are reaching your requirements and the goals that they need to succeed and become long-term customers. And also make sure that you're reducing your cost to unlikely leads that won't convert.
Yeah, that makes sense. So how do we figure out the right incentive to give people? We can't just look at customer acquisition costs or what we're paying for paid ads. People that come from paid ads aren't going to convert at the same rate. Maybe they convert better, maybe they convert worse. In my mind, is it just about running some different tests and seeing what works? Is just putting something out there? How do you think about starting from zero and figuring out what incentive to start with?
So yes, always experimenting, always be testing, as one of my former managers like to say, Glenn Ross adaptation. But the other key thing, and this actually should come from your insights on the product from the product team or your connection to it. What are those key actions that are happening in that first session, first 7 days, that most likely correlate to a long-term customer? And if you can start to identify those key actions that lead to that surprise and delight or aha moment for the consumer to say, yes, this meets my needs, I'm excited to use this over the long term, you can use that as a starting place on where you align your incentives to require people to take those actions, and actually start to use your app or whatever product or service you're offering, to make sure that that gives you the highest chance to really let them try it out, love it, fall in love with it, and retain going forward. So looking at those product experiences, features, and benefits is a good place to start on what to align your incentives to.
Do you have any simple rules of thumb of where to get started in terms of like cash value? Let's say I know 2-year user LTV is $100. Do I go, okay, well, I'm willing to give out $10 or $20 or like just in terms of where do I even this? I have an app. It's a subscription app. I'm launching a new referral program. I'm starting from zero. Where do I start?
Yeah. So generally, yes, you want to look at, well, what are the unit economics you need to hit and back out to that. The things, though, that simplified approach doesn't account for, once you decide what those incentives are, is considerations like cannibalization on the downside, but also halo on the upside. It also, if you're doing non-cash incentives, the value may be asymmetrical to both sides, meaning to the customer, they perceive something as $100 of value, but if you're giving them $100 t-shirt that costs $10 to make, oh, your effective CAC outlay is maybe $20 for 2 t-shirts. So where you have that asymmetry, you can increase the perceived value and real value to the customer, their value of it, but make the cost equation for you significantly lower, which can change the economics. So I would think about the halo cannibalization expectations there, and then think about also some of those rates of, if it's something like, credits within a product, well, how many people will fully utilize those credits, and does the utilization of those credits result in a one-to-one sort of point to dollar value to you, or is there some margin there? Because that further compresses the actual cost of running the program. And the last thing I would say on the Halo side is, this is hard to control, but there are often cases I've seen where sometimes it takes one influencer or personality to promote the program on their social accounts, and it goes viral, and it creates this massive, very real incremental halo. It's hard to structure that in an ongoing basis, but that's a real potential upside depending on the program design.
Cool. Okay. I want to get into kind of the influencer side in a second too, and so we've got through incentive, and I think that's a good transition to guardrails in terms of, what are like the list of, are there, should you think of guardrails as checkboxes that you want to be measuring? Is it a more qualitative view into guardrails? And I think it's also intimately entwined, right? Where the relevance is connected to the incentive and the guardrails have to be connected. We're already getting into that a little bit of guardrails in terms of making sure that it's not this one-off thing where people don't actually do product actions. If we can create guardrails where, in the meal delivery concept of ordering multiple times or getting a multiple times delivery, that's one form of guardrails. What other guardrails should we think about?
Well, I think the first piece that you hit on up top is, how do you analyze this? And it comes down to making sure that you're looking at your historical cohorts on an ongoing basis, monthly, and in some cases maybe weekly, if there's, depending on the level of risk within the program of the outlay of incentives that you're giving. But you want to look to see, how are these different cohorts maturing? What are their actual sort of paying conversion rates if your incentive is before a paying milestone? But even if it's after a paying milestone, what is their ultimate sort of lifetime value, whether it's retention or sort of further sales after that initial period? So you could start to see, versus your expectations of an LTV curve, if you have that level of sophistication, are these customers behaving similarly, better, or worse? And if you see that they're performing worse, then it gives you, for that, the motivation to dig in a little bit more and understand, okay, well, where are things breaking down? And then you can start to see if customers of certain profiles are really just using the program to get an incentive and get out the door. Some of that, again, like you said, comes back to making sure your incentives are the right ones that correlate to the product value. So I think those are some of the key things. You also were talking. What else on the guardrail side were you?
Well, I think in terms of guardrails, are we aligning it to product actions in terms of, are people going to do things long term? That's critical.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and that ties back into the tracking as well. Can you actually understand these cohorts? I'm sure there's a lot you can talk about on the fraud side. I'm sure I have fraudulently used some referral programs in terms of probably Blue Apron or some meal delivery to get multiple free meal deliveries. Maybe it was HelloFresh. How do you? This is an interesting one. How do you have to accept some level of fraud, and I think a lot of programs, you hope that it is more positive than negative if we see 10% of people are creating fake email addresses or getting things delivered to different addresses, or just having their friends sign up and it's really them. How do you think about that trade-off? And maybe it comes back to the tracking we were talking about before, but just measuring the cohorts long term,
Yeah.
seeing if it's net positive. But yeah, any thoughts on that?
I absolutely love that you asked this question because this has been something that has come up in my career as a source of debate on fraud and trying to eliminate fraud. I can't remember the source where I first heard this, but somebody much smarter than me said the optimal level of fraud in a business is not zero, right? Because there are trade-offs. It's all about trade-offs. The more you can guarantee the reduction of fraud, the more friction you're creating for well-intended customers. So there is a balance, and you need to accept for this goes to sort of broader sort of entrepreneurship, but for your business and also for your referral program, you have to accept some level of fraud and risk and inefficiency to maximize the total contribution and scalability of a program. Um, and another good way that's helpful for me to think about it in a referral context is what am I comparing referral to? I'm not comparing it to not doing a referral program. I'm really comparing it to the next best opportunity of how to spend money or apply incentives to drive customer acquisition. So the alternatives are things like digital marketing channels, like Meta and Google and others. We know there is fraud and inefficiency and tricks played on that side as well, particularly when you get into the true programmatic space. So there is inefficiency in all of these systems. It's all about on a relative basis, where is your best next dollar spent? And you can build referral programs where you accept that there's going to be some level of gamers or fraudsters that you can't prevent, but that still doesn't mean it can't be your most efficient source of acquisition that you should be comfortable sustaining. So I think that's really critical for how people think about sort of what they do and making sure they're not solving for zero gamers or zero for fraudsters. They're solving for a tolerable level where you reduce risk and waste through some reasonable, smart means of how you design the program, but you still enable a very natural, delightful experience for the customers who are participating in it in good faith.
I love that. Yeah, the correct level of fraud in a business is not zero. One,
Yeah,
the friction point is critical, where if you're eliminating all fraud, you're making it so difficult and painful that no one will do it. But also, if there's probably no fraud or no sharing, people don't care about your business. You're not getting any attention. People aren't coming to your site, and so that
true.
it's could
Yeah,
be right. It's positive. It should be viewed differently. It's a cost of doing business. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. All right, so we've got human timing and tracking. How do we human and timing feel like they're pretty connected to each other?
yeah. On the human centricity side, um, one thing that I have seen, especially now that I've been working as an independent consultant and advisor, looking at other businesses and helping other businesses, is I see that inconsistency in the customer journey, even in just a general sort of macro sense. Meaning, there's a lot of ads and organic media or messaging at the top of the funnel, and then when you go into the product from a registration and onboarding experience, it feels different or positions things and talks about the brand and the benefits to the customer slightly differently or maybe not at all. And then once you're post registration and you're onboarding and starting to experiment with the app, sometimes that's also a very different experience. And some of that is a result of different people owning these parts of the funnel and not a single person looking at it holistically. Um, so you take something like that and you think about it in the microcosm of a referral program, that same thing can happen. So I highly recommend anybody who's running referral programs or is thinking about starting referral programs that you really map out the customer touch points in a single place, like do a Fig Jam, Figma file or something similar, where you actually look at every single part of the journey and you see if you're reinforcing the key elements, if the new customer who has no awareness of your business understands who you are, what you stand for, what you're providing them, what problems you help them solve, as well as make sure you're reinforcing the context that this is coming from a trusted friend of yours, and you're both going to get an incentive by you participating, and do that at every single step along the way to the point of achieving that action, getting that reward, and then ultimately getting notified of that reward. That's another place that people forget to follow up on, is once somebody has earned an incentive, letting them know in a very clear way that gets them excited, that then becomes a mechanism for the loop to grow, to say, great, you got this referral, it worked for you. Now you can start to think about other friends and family members that you want to share this with.
Right. That's an important point, where the power of the referral is not one person shared it and got another person to join. The power of the referral is that that person shares another person, and that person shares again, and that person shares again. And so, yeah, we can dig into that as well in a sec in terms of how we optimize that whole loop. Cool. So then, in the timing perspective, how I'm thinking about it is, when do we promote the referral program to people?
Yeah, it's I really think about it like in three pieces. It's, well, when is referral the right time? When is it the right time for your business to do a referral program, which we talked about? What is the right time in the customer experience to introduce the referral program? And oftentimes that is either at the point of trial, depending on your industry, where it's, hey, I'm about to try this. You should try it too. Let's do it together and see if this is cool and interesting and valuable to us. In other cases, it's the point of that sort of product delight and delivery on its value. So once you've achieved something through the app, a key milestone, remind them to, you've had a great experience. Glad you're loving it. We want to give you more, incentives as a thank you. Tell your friends. It's as easy as clicking this and sharing a quick text message. Those sorts of things. And then lastly, from a timing, is just reinforcing the urgency piece. Because if you only maintain a low level program that has some evergreen component to it, it's going to be really, really hard to drive scalability from it, as your existing base who has seen it has become a larger and larger portion of your total customer base. Meaning, right, if you have 50 customers today, but you're acquiring 10 customers a day, you're just getting started, the influence of a referral program would feel stronger, because more people are seeing this for the first time out of the relative base. But after you have 1 million customers and you're still acquiring, let's say 10 to 20, even if they have the same rate of referral, I know before this, you and I were talking about K factors. If they have, if 10% of them participate in the program and each one refers 2 people successfully, and then each of those follows that same economic, that power of the program is going to be diminished over time as you reach a more mature customer base.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, that is interesting to think about, where potentially it's the same impact, but a lower of the overall contribution to user acquisition. It's a lower percentage. Yeah, it's
Exactly.
interesting. And then in terms of tracking all of this, attribution and tracking is a never-ending battle. We never get it right. How do
Yep.
you, and I think you talked about this a little bit in terms of cannibalization and making sure that your referral program is actually incremental. How do you figure that out? How do you know if your program is incremental?
That is, I would say, probably one of the hardest attribution puzzles of any sort of part of your acquisition mix. With other channels, you can often do things like geo holdout experiments, and you can also apply media mix modeling as well. For referral, it's definitely going to be a combination of signals that are ultimately going to leave you with something to react to and make an intuitive sort of decision based off of. So those factors that I would consider that come to mind, one is your post purchase survey, your how did you hear about a survey. So ideally you have some mechanism like that before you turn on a referral program, if you have any meaningful scale, because you can understand a baseline of those who said they heard about it from a friend or family member. And then you can see how that changes after you've launched your program, see if there's a meaningful delta there, and you could take the total cost of the program by that delta, regardless of link usage, but more so from well, how does the customer feel that they got started on this journey, to use that as one component. Another piece that I would say is, this is really like the most empirical one I can think of, is you look at your blended, customer acquisition costs over a period of time. And it's really a pre-post analysis of saying, once you launch this program, well, how many more or less customers did you get? If you can do this in a period, right, that there's not seasonal or external factors at play. And let's say you got, a similar amount of customers, but your CAC exploded because now you have this additional cost item of a referral program. You can start to surmise it wasn't very incremental. So that's a way to gauge and dimensionalize it in some level. The other thing that you can do is you can hold out a segment of your customers from participating in the program. But that's also really hard because it's hard to think about that on any sort of geographic level, because, right, people's friends are all over the place. And also for those who are not participating, how do you know? Yeah, how do you know what those interaction effects are within their networks? Because you can't really isolate. You can't know, for example, that this person has this network of people, and then if they ever sign up, that you suppress them from sort of saying the program exists. There's all those dynamics that just make it really, really hard from a pure analytical test design to set it up appropriately.
Yeah, I guess you could try something where 50% of new users coming in don't see the referral promotion, but if they join through referral, they still get the incentive, but it gets probably pretty complicated pretty quickly. And then if you're, if you have web assets as well that promote it, it's potentially a bit easier if you only have a mobile app. You don't have web assets where you can control those promotions and segment better, but it'll always probably be hard.
Yeah. And I think the other more most important to me side of it is, imagine these cases where you have something go viral, right? Somebody talks about this program broadly. Then, if you, in your example, 50% of customers don't see it, they come in, they get angry. They're like, well, I thought there was this program. Why can't I participate in it? That's part of why I'm excited to be a customer, because I see all of this value. And so you have to answer to those customers. And so I think in cases like referral, it really is, best to try to make sure that the majority, if not all of your customers, have a chance to participate in a way that that has those right guardrails to incentivize the right behavior.
Yeah.
And dissuade bad actors.
That makes sense. And realistically, when we look at who is using these referrals and who's giving the referral bonuses, it's not everybody is inviting one person. It's 5% of our user base is inviting thousands of people, where it's not an even distribution, right? It's whatever the mathematical,
like a power distribution.
Yeah, power distribution, but even probably stronger than that, where it's not like 80-20, it's probably like 199 in terms of where the impact. And then if you get this influencer or someone like that you can participate as well, then it's maybe even more magnified.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a good rule of thumb, at least from my direct experience, is it generally, if you have a mature program and you look at what is that distribution of referral rate by your customer base, a histogram view of it, it maps pretty similarly to a mature affiliate program as well. where you have, like you said, a few sort of key players driving the majority of your traffic. And then there's that long tail that happens very quickly throughout.
That makes sense. That makes sense. So we talked about K factor a little bit. How do we? What are these? If we want to get quantitative into this, how do we figure out this impact? How do we figure out like what is this formula in terms of understanding the potential for viral growth, but just the potential for growth overall?
Mhm. Yeah, so as we started to hit on, you first want to think about what is your base of who can refer. You then want to look at the referrals per customer, um, and and so that measure may be sort of less than one, greater than one, and then you want to look similarly as you would at your total funnel or other channel funnels. What is that stepwise conversion through the funnel? At the highest level, it's how many people did you refer, how many became customers, and that you could look at your K factor and also your effective customer acquisition costs. But you want to break it down and segment it even further into those key points within the customer journey we were talking about earlier to see, are these parity or better or worse than sort of your baseline organic experience and versus other paid channels, because you may use that to identify, well, these are the key levers on where we have to reduce friction. We got to provide more context or education in this, or, oh, we're adding too many steps. So we got to see if there's a way that we can remove steps, but still sort of protect the program design. And then the other piece that I think is really key to think about is as your program matures, there's going to be a degree at which a lot of your existing customers will have already seen this program now. So it's going to lose its luster. And so as you mature, you need to start to look at, well, what is the effective referral rates by customers of different tenures? Because naturally, people who see the program for the first time, it's going to be new to them. It could be exciting, and they likely are probably going to have an increased rate of referring and interest in referring because they haven't done so before. Whereas a customer you've had for 5 years, you've told them about the referral program already. They may have referred everybody that they think would be great customers. They're done. There's nothing else to do there for them. So you can expect your rate of referral on your total customer base to be the same over time. You need to look at it from in a shifted way towards your most recent customer base often, or your highest value customers who are most engaging, who continue to want to participate in the program because they're starting to do things outside of their direct network. They have a community or social presence or some other means that they want to regularly promote the program as well. At which point, as you see that, you want to start to look at, well, do we develop a direct relationship with them that is bigger and different than this core customer program?
One thing I saw with Acorns was that you would do these kind of periodic, like large incentives where you'd have $600, $800, $1,200 referral bonuses for referring 5 people. A few questions there. Is that a tactic you were talking about where your program becomes more mature, so you have to introduce these more exciting moments? And then would you make those offers available for everybody, or would those be, or maybe they're available for everybody, but the promotion is targeted at certain customer segments?
So in general, yes, that right, those bigger incentives were a way to uh, to create some sort of stopping factor in our customers to actually drive curiosity and engagement in the program beyond an evergreen program. Because at the time, which has since evolved, right, the average subscription revenue from a customer was such that if we start to think about that over 1 to 2 years, we have to be really thoughtful about our willingness to pay for a customer. So if every single customer sort of referred that many people and got that reward, maybe we wouldn't be as excited about the unit economics of it. So you had to think about the structures to drive engagement, but also understand actual participation rates in it. So I would just say a lot of it experimentation was done, and every brand should, do that in their own way to see what makes sense for them to reach that bar of driving engagement and enthusiasm. And then, as we were talking about on the human centricity side of it, it's making sure that your program isn't buried and you're getting in front of all or the right customers that you think could refer quality customers most effectively.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. And I think going back to that incentive, it's about how do you cut through the noise of everything else going on? How do you actually capture people's attention? And then can you do these, going back to the urgency, these are, short-term incentives, right? Where people get excited about this. You have X time period to do this. It motivates them. Maybe if they were considering referring a friend before, but they forgot, this pushes them over the edge to do it quickly. And then how do you think about influencer marketing is everybody wants to try it out right now. Everybody wants to figure out how to make it work for their brand. Would you try to pair, when you would do these larger incentives, would you try to pair this with paid marketing promotion to get that offer out there? Would you try to do it with influencers? How do you think about maximizing the impact of these shorter term referral incentives? How do you pour more fuel on the fire?
Yeah, I think there's a few things to tap into there that I think you tease out. One is, at the highest level, what you don't want to do, what you want to be very careful of, is over conditioning your customers to expect really compelling referral incentives all the time. Because if you start to condition them, then you can't walk it back ever. And so if you go all in across broader marketing channels and potential influencers who have really broad reach with this program, you could run the risk of a one-way door where you can never come back and recalibrate customer expectations. An analogy of that is, Cyber Monday, Black Friday, right? Like everybody in the e-commerce world is now conditioned to expect these discounts. And some brands I love, like I believe REI or Patagonia, they just don't participate. And it's so well tied to their brand values and ethos that they're able to do that. But it's really hard for others in that category to peel away from that. And that precedes some companies' existences. So it's kind of the nature of the space. But in a case of a referral program, that's also something you want to be really cognizant of not overdoing it to the degree that it becomes the expectation that you can't pull back at any time. That being said, though, on the other side of it, the thing I love about referral is it's one of those channels that you fully own. You can set all the levers in the way that you see fit to make responsible decisions to help yourself grow the business. And it also then has a higher degree of predictability once you reach scale. Whereas, as we know, right, the world of customer acquisition across marketing channels and SEO is rapidly changing, sort of every year, quarter, month now. So it's harder and harder to predict the reliability of some of those other channels for how they help you acquire customers. Whereas if you can build a really strong referral program that aligns to your mission, vision, values, and your customer experience, that could be a very predictable, resilient sort of part of your acquisition mix as some of those other things become more volatile over time. So it's definitely a balance of all of that. But the last thing I would say is I wouldn't start by saying, let's go all in across every single imaginable touch point, out of home ads, everything to go promote a program when you start experimenting.
That makes sense. It seems like a lot of it comes back to, as always, understand your unit economics, understand the impact that each incremental user is driving, model out your conversion rates. And if you understand this well, you're going to be much more confident about how to scale this, what additional incentives you can add that'll still be profitable. Maybe you, for certain periods, you can go towards break even to go a large promotion. and you think net it'll weigh out. In some periods, you can aim for larger profitability margins, but again, it's not it's a science, right? You need to understand what the returns, what the LTV of your users are, what really the acquisition costs come down to, and then back to your opportunity cost. It's not this or nothing. It's this versus the next best thing, and I think that's a useful thing to think about when you're thinking about these costs. Where it's okay, well, it costs this much to get a new user. Well, yeah, but that's we're getting 50% more users that refer more people, even if it's the same cost as paid marketing, where it can essentially still be a larger impact. Yeah,
Exactly.
makes a lot of sense.
And I would say the last piece on that too is if you structure everything correctly, those customers coming from a referral friend program on average should have a higher quality level as well, right? Because in the cases that your product is something that doesn't have really high awareness and you do feel like really, really delivers excellent value, a friend being able to explain that in their own words, and that trust and social proof really goes a long way in terms of overall conversion and retention of the customers coming in from there versus those who, see just a generic, digital advertisement.
And that's one of the reasons referrals can be so powerful, because it's not only acquisition, it's acquisition boost for new people coming in, but then it improves the retention of people who are referring, which is, you don't have a lot of tactics that actually can do both of those things.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, it's very magical when it works out well.
Yeah.
And especially if those incentives are aligned so that the person who's referring gets something that makes them further achieve the goals that they have for the product. Yeah, it's a win-win-win.
Nice, nice. My last question here is it are referrals right for every product? I see that for social products where there's some network effect, I think that there it can definitely make sense. For a lot of apps, it can still be incremental. I think that what I've seen for products that inherently have some word of mouth, that you're already seeing some sharing, that can be a good sign. But can you expand upon that from what you've seen in your experience? Should every company just have a referral program? How do you think about that?
Yeah, it's a great question. I don't necessarily, I wouldn't default to saying everybody should have a referral program. I think you need to understand uh, the, the word of mouth considerations and the community considerations there. I also think there's an axis of um, the risk of being wrong when referring somebody to something. So a good example in a financial services context from my prior experiences, let's take Acorns. Two people are saying, okay, we want to go start investing some spare change or some small dollar amounts in a diversified portfolio. If they get it wrong, right, or they don't love the experience, the cost to the person referring is really low. Oh no, I may have lost you $5 if the stock market went to zero, which it will never do. But like, right, there's the risk there is low. Whereas, in a case like Betterment, where maybe the customer is really thinking about moving their full retirement or IRA or their primary investing strategy for their lifetime to another platform, that's a big decision to trust to your friend who's not a financial advisor. So that's a much higher hurdle. And also for the friend, how high does the incentive have to be to make it worth their time relative to the their relationship with their friend and the level of burden that they may feel or obligation they may feel of this being the best solution for them. So that's not to say that those programs can't work for those higher consideration, sort of higher reputational risk referral programs, but that is very much a key barrier for some industries, um, making less sense for referral than others. Um, the last thing I would say too is there could be in your space a cultural consideration as well. Um, for example, in the nonprofit space, people may not feel great about getting money to refer their friend to help them support their mission of their nonprofit. So you need to think about the psychology too, and the incentives of the user and the customer, because sometimes those motivations may be very different across industries.
That's so great. Yeah, this was awesome. I love the RIGHTT framework, relevance, incentive, guardrails, human centricity, timing and tracking. That's, I think, super valuable. This was really awesome. The last piece we've been doing on the podcast is AI is such a hot topic. I kind of feel silly, but I'm going to ask it anyway. I love to just learn about what people are learning, trying in AI today. Maybe you can share anything you found really productive recently, tools you like, anything that's actually making your job easier versus just fun. Yeah, would love to
Yeah.
hear any quick insights, tips we can share.
Yeah, I would say on the true utility from a professional standpoint, the no coding tools of Lovable, Replit, V0, that category has been really helpful for me because it allows me and other people I work with who are not engineers or designers or even PMs to bring real mock-ups of taking our ideas to life in ways that get far enough there to more easily and quickly communicate our ideas to get to good solutions and move faster on shipping ideas. So that has actually been very very helpful for me. The other key one is in many of my calls I'm using Gemini's transcription services. So I'm transcribing calls, and then we use that as a reference point to just align on strategy and opportunities and make sure everybody's on the same page of next steps. But where it becomes really fun is in cases where I've worked with founders where we're really digging into what should be their messaging map and their value proposition and positioning, and start by doing a few sessions that we record where we dig into their origin story, go all the way deep into like their childhood memories, motivations, and prior companies that they've run and sold, and get all those stories together. And then I use a tool like Claude or ChatGPT that integrates with Google Drive as a way to say, now source from all of these conversations that we've had and help extract what are the key themes and insights that we could go deeper into from our general positioning, or even how we want to tell stories in our social platforms or in different blog posts. And that's been really, really cool and powerful to like get closer to what are the seeds that then we can build the content upon. Also, from a creative standpoint, I would say the tool that I have most consistently used is Opus for editing video content. So that has helped accelerate for some of the teams that I work with their ability for increasing their creative velocity for organic and paid social. And then the last thing I would flag is Perplexity. This is a little bit more on the personal side, but I definitely use it as my default browser now whenever I'm doing research for work. If I'm helping supports troubleshooting something in HubSpot, even if I'm really getting in the weeds, it will go through all of the documentation HubSpot has and get me the answer I need without me sort of spending all this time going link to link to link to link. Whether it's Google Ads or HubSpot, any platform like that, it's been really really helpful. And then sometimes when I'm eating lunch and I'm trying to take a break from screen time, I'll just use the voice version of Perplexity, and I'll have a conversation with it to dig into something deeper at work, or just learn something new random. Just have it teach me about something I wasn't even thinking about. Like I was learning all about octopuses the other day, which is a really fun journey to go down. So it's just like it just works for my natural sort of curiosity and keeping me sharp.
I love it. I love it. Those are great. Yeah, I've started doing the prototyping as well with different tools just to sometimes get my ideas out of my head where just to see what they look like. And I'll admit also I did use Perplexity to do some research for this podcast, and I think it's great. I got I pay for Lenny's newsletter, and so you get the pro Perplexity subscription from that. Yeah, it's pretty great. I guess he gets a free plug there. Those are awesome. Those are so great, and we'll include those in the show notes and links out there for people to go find. This was awesome, Anthony. I really appreciate you kind of sharing all this wisdom. Anything you'd like to promote? You want to quickly promote your advisory services or newsletter, or tell people where to find you?
Sure. Yeah. Just in general, people can find me on LinkedIn, Anthony Scarpaci. But I call my advisory practice Tunomatic. So you could check out tunomatic.com for more information. Or I have a infrequent newsletter right now as well. That's linked there on Substack. But say hi on LinkedIn. That's a great place to start.
Awesome. Well, this is really great. Thanks for joining.
Of course. Thank you.